Drawing this tiger is easier than you think, and I'm going to show you exactly how you can do it, no matter your skill level. Hello wonderful people, it's Genevieve, and my goal here on this channel is to teach you all about illustration and design. So if you're new, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of the weekly videos and so that you can join our wonderful creative community. And with that said, grab your drawing tools and let's get started. Welcome to part 2 of our Tiger mini-series. Part 1 was about drawing this sketch. If you haven't watched it, I highly recommend you go check it out first. I will link it in the description below. Then you can come back to add the color. Don't worry, part 1 is really short. Now, we're going to start by changing the blending mode of the sketch to multiply, which is going to help us see the sketch better on darker color as well as lighter color. It's kind of evening it out a little bit. And we're also going to lower the opacity of the sketch layer until we can just barely see it. Once that is done, go ahead and create a new layer that you're going to put below the sketch layer. So you can just drag it really easy and you're going to rename it to base. Now on this base layer, all we're going to do is we're going to draw the silhouette in one solid color for our tiger. And for that, you can pick whichever orange you like. I'm gonna go with this one, but feel free to use any other kind of, you could go with even like a blue or a green tiger if that's your thing. Now in this video, I'm always going to be suggesting 2 different brushes. One is going to be a free brush that comes with Procreate and it's going to allow you to follow along the tutorial just fine. You're probably going to be getting, 80 to 85% of the result. So definitely a great choice. I'm personally going to be using and recommending brushes from my Ultimate Illustration Bundle. If you want to check it out, it is linked in the description below and there's always a special promo code for the YouTube people. It is not essential though, you can definitely follow along with the free brushes. So for the outline here, all we want is a brush that doesn't have any texture or any crazy shape to it. So a good option for that with the free brush would be the hard brush in the airbrushing panel, making sure that you bring the opacity back up to 100% if you follow my watercolor tutorials. Otherwise, I'm gonna go with the base round brush again from the illustration bundle. And this step is probably the most important, but it's also probably one of the easiest. We're just going to draw the outline of the tiger so that we can fill it in and create the silhouette. So that's literally all you have to do, draw the outline, making sure that there's no gap, otherwise when we go ahead to fill in the silhouette, it's just going to fill in the entire canvas. So again, this step is really easy, it is not rocket science, but it is super important for you to have a nice silhouette. So feel free to pause the video in order to take all the time you need, and then we're going to be in the next step in which we're going to add the secondary colors, the stripes, and everything. So once you have your outline, you can just drag your color on the shape like this to fill it in. No need to fill it in manually by drawing inside the lines. And once we have the silhouette, we can go ahead and hide the sketch just to make sure that everything looks right. So you can see here by hiding the sketch, I'm noticing that I'm not quite happy with this side of the head. So make sure that you take the time to tweak everything so that you're super happy with your silhouette before moving on to the next step. At this point, you can reactivate your sketch so that we know where to add these secondary colors, as well as creating a new layer above the base and below the sketch. Rename this new layer to white, and this layer we're going to apply as a clipping mask. So you can just tap on the layer to show the layer options and then select clipping mask from the drop-down menu like this. It's going to show this little arrow on the side, and now everything we draw on this white layer is going to stay within the silhouette of the base. So that way we can just draw really quickly without worrying about staying in the lines. Now you're gonna go and pick a lighter version of your base orange, so like a cream color. And in terms of brushes, depending on if you want texture or not in your illustration, you can go with the 6B pencil from the sketching panel. I'm gonna go with the basic texture brush, again from the illustration bundle. If you don't want any texture, you can just stick with the hard brush. And here, I like to start by drawing a little oval for the belly. I just think it's really, really cute. And I like to fill it in manually because I want the texture from the brush to show in the color in the center as well, not just in the edges of the outlines. Once you have your belly, you can go and brush with the same brush and the same color over the ears to make them white as well. And brush these little raindrop, teardrop shapes above the eyes, as well as just coloring very loosely the bottom and sides of the face in this kind of similar pattern as what I'm doing right here. And making sure that the edge, like bottom edge of the head is sharp. So you want the middle part of that head color to be a bit looser, but the bottom needs to be really sharp. You can also draw a little bit more white on the bottom of the feet like this. And you can also add white on any other area that you might want. So you could add some on the tip of the tail, blend in the face details a little bit more. Whatever you want here, you can definitely do. Now, once you're happy, we're definitely going to pick the eraser, setting it to the hard brush so that we can erase the overlapping part of the belly. Oops, that's way too big. So that we can erase the overlapping part of the belly and the arms, because that just doesn't work. So just gonna go over and erase the part where the arms are in front of the belly. Nothing complicated here, but definitely really important to do, otherwise it just doesn't make sense. We are, however, once that is done, gonna go back with the paintbrush to add a little bit of white on the hands as well, or your paws, just a little bit smoother and not necessarily fully in line with the rest of the belly, a little bit more like this. And once you have your white or your cream color mapped out, go ahead and create a new layer above that, rename it to stripes or black, whatever you want, just as long as you remember what it is. And you're also going to apply it as a clipping mask, so just tapping on it like this. Now on this layer, you might guess it, we're going to draw the stripes, so you can go ahead and pick a very dark brownish grayish color. You don't want to go with pure black, otherwise we won't be able to add shadows later, and we definitely want to do that. So just something that looks quite dark, but is not quite black. And we're going to stick with the same brush here, and we're simply going to draw, I guess, little triangles for the stripes. If you want, you can for sure go ahead and Google tiger so that you can follow an exact stripe pattern that is a bit more accurate. Otherwise, you can just follow along what I am doing. I'm not going to go over and try to explain every stripes though, because the explanations, I just tried and it was more confusing than anything. So just look at the example and follow along if that's what you do. Otherwise, you can just go ahead and, let loose and draw the stripes that you want to have on your own tiger. A few things to keep in mind though, if there is a stripe on a shape that is kind of curved, for example, the arms, make sure that the stripes are curved as well. So you don't want to have straight lines, you want to make sure that they're following the curves of the body. So something a little bit like this. It doesn't have to be a crazy intense curve, but it shouldn't be a perfectly straight line either. And with that said, it is time for the secret password. So if you've watched this fun video, please go ahead and comment stripes. If you're new on the channel, you might be like, what's the deal with the secret password? Well, we've been doing this for a few months now and people have been really enjoy it. So basically in every video at one point, I'm gonna say and write on screen a secret password that you can comment. It is a really nice way for us to see who's part of the creative community that we're building here on the channel. It also gives me a lot of insight into how to edit and paste my videos better, which helps me to create better tutorials for you guys. It's also really cool because not only you can see the community, but I can see who's part of the channel here, because you guys know me, you see my face, you hear my voice, but I have no idea who you guys are. And whenever you leave a comment, I get to see sometimes your name, sometimes your face. And again, it's just great to see the wonderful creative community that we're building here on the channel. So just leave a comment with the word stripe in it, and then we're going to keep going. We're going to change the background color and then move on to adding some details to bring our tiger illustration together. For the background color, you can obviously pick whatever color you want. I'm personally going to set my background layer, to a dark blue so that later we can go ahead and draw a starry night. But blue is also a really good option here because the tiger is orange and blue and orange are complementary colors, so they work really well together. Awesome! So now that we have our base, we're going to move on to adding details and shading everything. So start by creating a new layer above all your color layer but below the sketch layer and rename it to details. Make sure that this one is not a clipping mask. We want to make sure that we can go outside of the base color. You're also going to color pick your orange or just find it in your color history and make it darker. For now, don't agonize over the color. We're going to change it later. We just want to make sure that it's going to show up. So that's what I personally like to do. In terms of brushes, you can pick from the sketching panel the 6B pencil, or if you have the illustration brushes, go ahead and pick the outline brush, of course. And here, the only thing we have to do is literally just going over, drawing the details and the outline. For now, don't draw the facial feature. We're going to draw that on a separate layer in the very next step, just so that we can move them around easily if we want. So here, pretty much just the outline of the body and any kind of detail like the fingers or, whatever else you might think of adding. That is the step in which you want to do that. So here I'm going to stop talking, speed up the video to let you focus on the details. Take all the time you need. Feel free to pause the video even if you want. I recommend just keeping it going so you can see what I'm doing and take inspiration on that. And then we're gonna meet in the next step, in which we're gonna add little hair everywhere, well, not everywhere, in some spots, and then drawing the facial features as well before moving on to shading. Great, so once you have your outlines pretty much done, you might want to move on, like I was telling you, to adding a little bit of hair so that the tiger doesn't look like it's made of plastic. So I like to just go over both on the very edge as well as on the color itself, just adding groups of 1, 2, or 3 hair, a little bit everywhere. I can just sprinkling them. It does a really good job, I feel, at least. If it doesn't do a good job at showing that, feel free to let me know in the comment, but I feel like it does a good job at showing the fact that the tiger has some hair without actually going in and drawing every single hair strand, which is very tedious. Once that is done, you can go ahead and create a new layer above the details below the sketch and rename it to face. And we're just going to draw the face with the same brush. For this, I'm going to go with a grayish burnish, what is that word? Brownish color, and just going over the eyes, the mouth, and the nose. Again, I like to draw them on a separate layer from the rest of the details so that if we want to move them around, it is easy. We're not going to move out the entire tiger. We're just going to move around the features that we want. And here, just a little pro tip for you. When you're drawing a mouth, it is a really good idea to put some emphasis on the corners of the mouth. That is a really nice way of just putting more life in your character. Corners of the mouth, believe it or not, show a lot of the emotion in the face. So when you're drawing, that's a little tip that you might want to keep in mind, just making sure that the corners of the mouth are really clearly visible. Now on this face layer, we also want to add some whiskers, so making sure the face layer is still the one selected, you're gonna make your brownish color lighter to go with a grayish, beigeish kind of color and just sketch your whiskers. I like to go just with 3 on both sides. And a cool tip here, since we're drawing on a separate layer, you can always use the selection tool to select either one whisker or one side of the whiskers like this with the freehand option, and then using the arrow tool, setting it to distort to just kind of change either the shape or the angle or the rotation of the whiskers to make them match on both sides. And with that, we're done with the hardest part of the tutorial. Now everything from now on is going to be easier, just adding more details, shading, and making everything look so much better than it does right now. And we're going to start by, well, shading. So for that, create a new layer above your stripes or black layer below the details layer. Rename it to shadows and apply it as a clipping mask as well. You're going to change the blending mode of this layer to either linear burn or multiply. Both are good options for shadows. And you're also going to lower the opacity around 50%, but we can always come back and tweak it later. We're also going to hide the sketch layer because we don't need it for now. We want to make sure that we see the shadows that we're drawing really well. Now for the shadows, you might be tempted to go with a pure gray. I recommend you go with a gray that has a slight tint to it, like a grayish purple or a grayish blue, just so that your shadows are less muddy and more interesting, basically. So for the brush, you can stick with the 6B pencil from the sketching panel. I'm gonna go back to the basic texture brush from the illustration bundle. Now here, I'm pretending that my character is in a night scene so that there's no clear light source. So I'm just going to be adding my shadows below every kind of different body parts to help separate them, but there's not a clear like shadow area or shadow side. It's really just to help add more dimension to the character. So you can follow along what I am doing. If your tiger is in a different environment, make sure that the light matches the light source of the environment. So the trick for that is think of where the sun is in the sky and then draw the shadows on the opposite side of your character. So for example, if the sun would be on the top right in your illustration, even if you don't draw the sun itself, make sure that all your shadows would be on the left, mostly on the bottom, especially whenever there's an overlap between body parts, you would have a shadow there. Now I talk about shading a little bit more in detail in my lion drawing tutorial. lion, not line, lion like the animal. So if you want to have a little bit more explanation about shading, you can go check it out. Otherwise, you can just, do your own thing or copy what I'm doing right here. And at this stage, we're really just mapping out the general shadows, and later we're going to go ahead and blend them so that it actually looks good. So right now, don't worry too much about the edges, just make sure that the general areas are filled in, basically. And once you're happy with the shadows that you have mapped out, you can go back to the shadow layer to change the opacity until you like the blending of it all. So here it's really a question of personal preference. You don't have to do the exact same thing as I am doing. You can also use the adjustment panel here at the top, selecting hue, saturation, and brightness for the entire layer to change the hue and the tint and the saturation, well, not the hue and the tint, the hue and the saturation of your shadows. Again, to just experiment and see if there's something that you prefer just by tweaking these settings. Again, it is a personal preference. I'm going to stick with pretty much what I already had, so I'm not going to change the settings too much. And once you're happy with both the opacity and the color of your shadows, we're going to go back and blend them in so it doesn't look quite as crazy as it does right now. So for that, you can use the smudge tool, and if you want a super soft shadow, you can pick the soft brush from the airbrushing panel. I like to have more textures in my illustration, so I'm going to go with the stucco brush from the painting panel. And here, all you want to do is go over and blend your shadows again so that they don't look crazy. This is another step that is a total personal preference. You can keep hard edges or really soften everything depending on the feel that you like. I like to blend both hard edges and soft edges in the same illustration to get a little bit more variety, especially here, for example, below the arms. Since the arms are clearly the one casting a shadow, I'm keeping this edge really sharp. But for example, on the feet, since there is nothing clearly casting a shadow there, it's just kind of the shape and the fact that the tiger is 3D. The reasoning behind the shadow is that I'm blending the shadows so that they are soft and not clearly defined. Now you might notice that our details and outline are blending really strangely with the shadows, so we're going to fix that really simply by just changing the color of some part of the details layer. Now to do that in a really quick and efficient way, all you're going to do is apply alpha lock on the details layer, and the way to do that is just swiping the details layer towards the right with 2 fingers like this. You can also do it manually by tapping on the layer and then activating it from the menu right here. Now everything we draw on the detail layer is going to stay within the shape that we already have created. I'm just going to show you an example here. So that way you can quickly recolor your outlines without having to kind of go over and try to stay in the same line that you did before. So here you're just going to color pick the darkest part of your orange, make it even darker, and sticking with the 6B pencil or the basic texture brush, you're just going to brush over the areas where the outlines are blending in with the shadows. So you can just go really quickly and loosely here. It's not about precision, it's just about adding more contrast in the illustration. We're also going to use this technique to make some of the outlines black where there is a stripe or a black detail on our character. So for that, you can just color pick the gray or brownish color that you used for your stripes, make it even darker, and again, just doing the same thing, brush over the outline whenever there's a black accent or a stripe on your character. Here, there's no need to be super precise. You don't need to exactly draw along the stripe or anything like that, but it is a nice way of making the outline feel like they blend in the illustration a little bit more. It's going to make your illustration feel more polished and more professional overall if you do take the time to change these tiny little details that are, not that time consuming and not difficult at all, but definitely make a big difference. You can also use this technique to add more color variation on the facial features, so just activating alpha lock on the face layer, again swiping it with 2 fingers towards the right or activating it manually from the menu. You can make your color darker and add a shadow on the bottom part of the nose. It is really hard to see on the video, so I'm just going to add the original illustration on top here so you can use this as a reference. And you can also pick a pure white to add a crazy intense highlight on the nose, making it really pop and making your illustration look super cute. So for that, I like to draw just a little circle like this and then a horizontal line. And with that, we're ready to start drawing the background and adding some special light effect on our character. So we are going to start by grouping all of our tiger layers together by swiping them towards the right with one finger and then clicking the group option here at the top, which is going to allow us to just collapse the group, rename the group to tiger. This is going to make our file just so much more organized, and we can also then move the entire tiger, which is the arrow tool, in one fell swoop, so that's super easy. Once that is done, go ahead and create a new layer above the tiger group and rename it to smoke. This layer, we're going to apply it as a, we're going to change the blending mode, to soft light for now. We can always go back and tweak it later. And we're going to reactivate our sketch and maybe up the opacity of the sketch so we can see what we're drawing. And for the smoke, you can just pick the white that you use for the nose, so just pure white. In terms of brushes, you can stick with the 6B pencil, or if you have the illustration bundle, you would pick the outline brush. And the challenge here is to draw the smoke in the fewest stroke as possible so that they are as fluid as they can be, so that the smoke is believable. So here you're better undoing and redoing than erasing, definitely. So here you can see pretty much did it in, 4 or 5 strokes. Ideally you would want to do it in 2, so 1 for either side of the smoke, but you know what, we're not perfect, so 4 or 5 is good as well. Then all you have to do is fill in your outline to fill in the smoke. And since we're using a textured brush, you might have to adjust the threshold of the color drop, so you can just hold your pencil on the screen and move it from left to right until you get the fill that you like. Once that is done, you're going to create a new layer above the smoke layer, and you're going to rename this one to smoke details, or something similar to that. And this is the layer on which we're going to draw, well, the smoke details. What a surprise. This one, the blending mode is going to be overlay for now. You can again always experiment with different blending modes to see if you find one that you prefer. These are just the one that I suggest and I like the feel of. And we're going to stick with the same brush, so the 6B pencil or the outline brush. You might want to make it a little bit smaller here. And all we're going to do is maybe hide the sketch layer or not, depending on your preference. You're just going to go and add some detailed smoke lines. So there's really no rule here. There's no specific way to do this. You want to add some accent on your smoke to make it pop a little bit more, but you can really draw whatever you want. And don't worry about the fact that it's going over the tiger for now. In the next step, we're going to erase the parts of the smoke that shouldn't be on top of the tiger, so that the smoke looks like it's kind of wrapping around the tiger, I guess. So yeah, for now, just draw everything like it's all in front of it, and then later we're gonna fix it. And I'm really sorry guys, as you can see just in a few seconds, my camera started overheating here, so I had to cut. But basically all you're doing here is adding some fluid lines to make your smoke a little bit more detailed, so nothing complicated, it's just something a little bit like this. And once you're done, you're going to create a layer mask on the smoke layer. And I'm not going to go into too much details about layer. If you don't know what they are, I have a video in which I teach everything you need to know about layer mask. For now, just know that you need to create a layer mask, and then you can use the eraser to erase on this layer mask the part of the smoke that should be behind a tiger or behind a mountain or behind a rock. And using the mask is going to allow you to go back and reactivate basically the smoke drawing without having to redraw it. But again, I'm not going to go in details. If you want to learn more about mask, go check out the video about it. It is going to help you a lot in your illustrations. We're also going to create a layer mask on the smoke details layer to erase the smoke details that should be behind the tiger. And we're also going to go back and hide the sketch layer, zoom in to make sure that everything is exactly where it should be, so nothing is overlapping where it should not be overlapping. And now that we have the smoke, we're going to go back in the tiger group layer to add some sort of a light effect that the smoke would be creating. You can also, by the way, I forgot to mention that you can go back and change the opacity of the smoke details layer and the smoke layer until you get something that you like. I'm just gonna stick with something like this. But yeah, once that is done, you can go back in the tiger group, create a new layer above the shadow layer, apply it as a clipping mask, and rename it to light. Now on this layer, we're going to use the blending mode color dodge, and we're going to, for now, set the opacity around 50%. But again, you know the drill by now. You can always go back and tweak it later so that you find something that you like. And we're gonna pick a super bright, vibrant blue, which I know probably sounds crazy right now, but trust me. We're also going to go back to the basic texture brush. If you're using the free Procreate brushes, you stick with the 6B pencil. This is your guide for this tutorial. And what we're going to do is we're going to outline the parts of the tiger that are facing or near the smoke. So here we're pretending that this is some sort of a magical, mystical smoke that has some light in it, I guess. So it's lighting some parts of the tiger really, really faintly in a kind of magical way. So this is adding a lot of texture, well, not texture, a lot of dimension to our character, just making the illustration feel more interesting. And since we're using blue, blue is usually not a color you would see in lights. Blue is a color that you would see in shadows. It makes you think when you see a light that is blue or green or any cool kind of color, it makes you think that it's something a little bit less natural. It's not like the sun, it's more magical or artificial light. So playing with the color that you use for your lights is a really nice way of adding special effects really easily on your character. So here again, you can see all I'm doing is adding some extra little lights on the areas where the smoke is surrounding the tiger. And I'm also adding a highlight on the top of the head, which doesn't really necessarily make sense in terms of the smoke itself, but I'm just thinking of the moon. Maybe the moon is casting the same kind of light on top of the head as well. And you can see here, if I hide this light layer, it is very subtle, but it brings so much light on a character. So it's a little detail I highly recommend you do. It's not super complicated. And you can also go back on your facial detail layer to add blue on the middle of the nose like this, because the nose should be really shiny. So it would probably kind of be reflecting this light really intensely like this. Now at this point we're pretty much done with the tiger, but it looks like it's floating, which is not exactly what we want. So we're going to create a new layer below the tiger group, and we're going to rename it to rock. You're going to color pick the color of the sky or the color that you use for your background, and you're going to make it even darker than it already is. And you might want to reactivate your sketch, and then all you have to do is map out the outline of your rock or your mountain. I like to think this is a really thin mountaintop piece on top of a really, really high mountain. And then you can fill it in with your color so that you have a solid color or solid silhouette for your rock mountaintop. You're then going to activate alpha lock on this rock layer so that we can add really quick shadows and lights. So just making your color darker to add some shadows on one side. And then you're gonna go in, make your color super light, make sure that it has a little bit of a bluish tint to it if you're using a different background color as I am, so that the lights that you're going to add right here on the rocks match the light on the tiger. So here you can just draw the outlines of the rock with the light, and you can also add some extra little details on the rock mountain if you want. I'm just going to do something simple like this. You don't want to have too many details on your background because you want the focus to stay on the character, in this case the tiger, so you just want to show that it's standing on something, but nothing more than that. You can also create a new layer below the rock layer, rename it to clouds, and pick the color of the background once more, making it slightly lighter this time. Not too light, just a little bit more light than the background. And you can sketch some clouds on the sides. I like to keep them on the bottom so that I can add some stars on the top, but you can draw them wherever you want. And yeah, you can see here it's just really simple shapes, but the goal here is just to add more depth and illustration, which is always good. I personally like to lower the opacity of this cloud layer so that they barely are noticeable, and you could go ahead and create as many cloud layers as you want, just layering them and playing with the opacity so it looks like you have a bunch of different clouds. For now, I'm just going to stick with that, but always know that this is an option that you have if you want. And now that we have the clouds, we're going to move on to adding stars, which is really going to bring the background to life. So just create a new layer below the clouds layer, and for that you can pick a super bright blue color. And all you have to do here, using the same brush that we're using, just going ahead and sprinkling some little dots on your piece to add some stars. And this is a little easy detail that is going to make a big difference in the final result, just kind of bringing everything together and filling in the empty space of the background. And just like that, you drew your own tiger. Congratulations. If you want to learn how to draw even more cute illustrations just like this one, I highly recommend you check out this playlist. But before you leave, make sure to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss any of the weekly videos. Then just click on the link right here and I'll meet you there.